Hey Horde, I'm Bentley Dean. Today we're going to go through my track 1348. It's out on Mousetrap's We Are Friends Volume 9. I'm going to go through the structure of the track, my overall thought process, and then break down some of the synthesis techniques I use, including some Eurorack. Then we'll move over into Pro Tools and I'll show you some of the mixing stuff that I did too. Alright, so I'm pretty much just going to start at the top of the project, work my way down. This first group here is just MIDI. It's sending MIDI to each respective channel. So this one's going kick, sub, bass, leads, and so on. This helps me really kind of shape the track with sidechaining. It's great for getting the kick out of the way when the sub comes in, and the sub out of the way when the kick's in. So you can see it's just following the same patterns here. Now, if I just play the kick here, you can kind of hear the difference with the shaping on and off. So an LFO tool, normally the plugin loads like this. If you hit this twice, it triggers an envelope based on the MIDI that you sent. The way I'm doing it here is just an external instrument, and I just pick the kick group and send it straight to the LFO tool. If you click this little button here, you see the waveform show up. So there you go. As you can see, the envelope re-triggers with the MIDI, which is pretty helpful. Without it, kind of hear that like dirty tail end that I don't really like the sound of that on there. Then back on, see that. Then when it comes to the sub, the same kind of thing applies here, but it's the complete opposite. I like to stack these two together when I'm balancing kick sub. You can see that the sub's completely out of the way when the kick's out playing, and then the kick is out of the way when the sub comes in. So yeah, pretty basic, both being triggered by that same kick pattern there. Another thing I use for that kick sub balance, which is pretty important, specifically in dance music, there's a couple tools I use here. First one is this Megascope. It's by Ben Schultz. I think it's probably 20 bucks, maybe 30 bucks. It's very helpful for referencing other songs in Rekordbox. Rekordbox kind of has that waveform display that kind of tells you, okay, your kick's way too loud, or your kick's non-existent. So this one definitely helps. You can see it real time. You can run it as a plugin, or there's a standalone too if you want to take processing power out of Ableton. The second one I use is this VU meter. There's a ton of different free ones out there. I believe this one's free. Basically what you want to do is take the reading down here of your kick soloed. So -6.2, which is kind of hot. And then from there, when you add your low end in, you don't want to cross an increase of 3. So -3.2 would be the maximum you would do. But yeah, if I turn this on, you won't see that it gets close to that. So then you can see up here, this balance is decent, and then this doesn't cross -3.2, so I know that my sub's not going to be too loud in comparison to my kick. So yeah, those are two helpful tools there. Let's go back to, let's turn these off. From there, I just have pretty basic basic house, electro house drums. Nothing too special here. Just got a pretty simple hi-hat pattern. I have two here because I had this one originally, and then added in this second one. Basically, just because you'll hear the sound of the first one. Doesn't sound too great. However, when you add in the second one, I pan them a little bit as well. It's a lot better. One thing I will note, when you're layering two different sounds to make one cohesive sound, it's very important to like check your phase. This plugin by Melda Production is very helpful at doing that. Basically what you do is throw one of these on this one and another on this one, and then the plugin does it all for you, which is great. Just click this analyze button and it will correct the alignment of your second track to your first one, or vice versa, and that way they line up perfectly so you're not getting any phase issues. So this one was 211 samples, or 4.4 milliseconds. Without it, listen to how you can hear phasing between the two cymbals. And then when I turn it back on, it's one cohesive sound now. So it's pretty important. Another time you'd want to do this would be with the kick drums. If you're layering even just the tiniest top kick drum or anything like that, you definitely want to check that. You'll be amazed at how kind of punchier the kick becomes when you do that. Simple, but very effective. And then, yeah, snare, I got a clap that fills it out here. Nothing crazy. And then a redux little fill. I believe it was just some white noise that I used a arpeggiator on from Ableton and just made this. Yeah. And then I have that panning just to kind of keep room for the rest of the drums in there. So together, I have then this drum group here going straight out into this drum bus, sorry. And then the kick is also going into there, so they all... And then, yeah, just getting rid of some EQ that I didn't like there. Pretty basic stuff. So yeah, next I'm gonna go into the bass group. This is pretty much the main aspect of this song. There's tons of different layers in here. I'm gonna start with these main basses here. First thing I'll do when I'm writing a song is kind of just develop a statement. That could be in the bass, or if I'm using a chord progression, I'll make that statement and then make the response aspect of it later. So yeah, I reach for this Moog pretty much 24/7 when it comes to this. So this first sound, get rid of these ones. So you can see I have that just very basic pattern and leaving room for a response by a different synth. The next sound here, this one is basically just a little, it's not doing a whole lot there. What I did with this was it carries between the statement and the response. So if I play, this would be the response, and then this is the statement. If you listen to the two, it sounds kind of empty when this is supposed to play. So and then with it back in, it carries it. So yeah, you can kind of see that I did that there. Changed up the length of it each time, so it's not the exact same all the way throughout. Kind of keeps it a little bit more interesting when you do that. If you just have the same thing over and over again, it gets kind of repetitive. This last bass here is just a Moog with unison again. Yep. And then this is actually teasing at the second half of the track, which if you're familiar with it, I didn't want to have it be the exact same as the first half. So what I did was change up the second half of like the first 8 bars. So that's only in the second half. But in the first half, I wanted to kind of hint at it without giving it away completely. So that's why these little fills are there. Nothing crazy, but it changes things up, keeps it interesting. This little chugger sound is my response section. It's all Eurorack based. I actually made a patch to kind of show you guys in a second. But yeah, this is the sound. That vocoder came from Isotope Vocal Synth. It's a great little vocoder. It was actually the first time I'd used it. Obviously, I flattened a lot of this to audio, so you can't pull up that setting here. Then I have underneath that, this one's actually pretty weak by itself. I wanted to add some low end there. So yeah, the two of them together then. So that's how I had those two layered there. Kind of fills it out. Without that low end in there, it sounded pretty weak, so I added that. I think it was later in the project I did that. And then the last 8 bars here, this is just climbing up. And then this low end layer does not climb, which I found kind of interesting because when this was climbing, it was losing a lot of power to the sound. But with this added in, it sounds a lot better. So back in. Still kind of lose a little bit at the end, but that's to be expected. So yeah, let me get into some of this Eurorack stuff. So like I said, that other sound up here, this vocoded sound, came from Vocal Synth. The original sound I was able to pull back from one of my older versions of this song. Let me just mute some of this other stuff here. So the original sound was this. Doesn't sound anything like it without that vocoder. But that was the sound that came straight out of my Eurorack. So I can go over some of that stuff with you guys too. Basically, Eurorack is, let's hop on over there. This is my trusty little system. It's nothing special compared to Joel's got the walls and walls of it. But yeah, I got this sound from that. Basically, you're going to send a MIDI out to a specific module that will convert it then to control voltage. It doesn't accept like a regular 5-pin MIDI or USB. This module, however, on the left side does. It then converts to volts per octave and then your gate signal. So if you follow this chord here, it'll take you to the pitch of this oscillator here, which is the Manus Iteratas by Noise Engineering. So yeah, that's basically my MIDI now, is this patch cable. And then gate is this yellow guy right here. And the gate follows this pattern. If I hop back to my DAW really quick, follows this. So as you see, this note is E, and then if you leave it like this, it doesn't really work too well with your rack, so you have to have a gap in there. the gate signal will play and then turn off here. Play, turn off. And then if I hop back onto here, I use this envelope here, so you'll see a red light flashing. You can match that gate signal. So without it, you can see I will just make it one long MIDI note. It'll end up like this. Doesn't work. And it does work. So there is a big difference there. Especially when you're using that gate signal to trigger things along with the pattern. So the first thing that I triggered here was my envelope. So that's this module here, attack, decay, sustain, release. These kind of settings here are what I used for this sound. Again, it's not the exact same. This is the sound that I made for this. And then if you from that release. So yeah, again, not the same sound because once you pull these patch cables, you're kind of out of luck there. So yeah, this entire sound is based off this Manasai, like I said. Matt Lang actually helped develop that one, so it's a pretty great module, if I say so myself. So yeah, from there, I just have this going out, the output of the oscillators, then going into this U fold. It's just a wave folder. Without it, you'll get this sound. Pretty bland, but then when you turn it up, so yeah, that definitely makes it a little bit more aggressive. And then back to this envelope here. The main envelope here is being sent to the cutoff of my filter, which is this right here. So the output of the wave folder goes into the input of my filter, which is permanently closed unless the envelope is playing. So if I open this filter, you'll hear what it's like without a filter. You could use a VCA for the same effect if you want to, but filter is a bit more tonally pleasing than just a VCA. VCA will just drop it in volume. So yeah, with this envelope then, you can kind of... I'm just lengthening the release there. So you can kind of hear how I shaped that sound that I made for this song, and then vocoded it, obviously. And then yeah, after that, it's basically out of the filter into my VCA, and then this one right here goes into my output, and that's going to my interface. Alright, so yeah, that's pretty much how that worked out there. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. You can kind of get lost in the modular stuff for hours on end too if you're not careful. So yeah, that pretty much sums up the vocoder section there. Let's see, make sure I got everything turned back on. So this is how this drop sounds right now. So I like how that sounds, but wanted to add some more in. So that's where these fills come in, and a majority of these again are from the Eurorack. I'll tend to have nights where I'm having writer's block or something similar. I'm just not in the mood to write music. I'll just tinker with the Eurorack, and I learned this from Noisia. If you just open up Ableton, hit record on your input from your synth, and then just tinker with it, you'll come up with some really cool stuff, and you'll have however long worth of recording to go back and resample later. So here's just a few. This is just I don't even know how many days this is. You can see they're all different dates. Some of these are like 4 hours long when I was just messing around. So that's where I get all these sounds from, which can be pretty interesting. You can kind of see they're not exactly like perfect sounding samples because they just come straight from the synth, which I kind of prefer. It gives you like a more unique vibe than just using samples 24/7. This one actually came from an old Moog Voyager that I recorded back at one of my internship studios. So yeah, it's just pretty basic. I like using that frequently actually as a fill. So yeah, you can kind of hear now if I close this without the fills. And then with. A lot more interesting that way. Next bass is going to be this first bass, which looks like it's just Moog again. So that'll bring us then over to the verse, I guess. This verse was pretty heavily inspired by like a Mord Fustang style verse. When I wrote this, I was in a heavy listening spree to his stuff, his older stuff specifically. So yeah, that bass there is just gonna follow along with the chord progression and add some of that low end warmth that I needed. The chord progression is pretty basic. Right here, I'm pretty sure one of these is Serum, and then one is the SH01A, which is just a little Roland boutique module. It's about this big. It's sitting on my desk right there. Can't really angle it to you guys right now. But yeah, that one's a little polyphonic one. You can do up to 4 voices at the same time. So yeah, layered those two together to get this kind of chord progression here. And obviously the filter opening. Use this UAD Moog filter. It's definitely my favorite one, especially with this drive feature. It's fantastic. So yeah. So the verse then, let's see. Obviously I have like my little bass teases as well in that build up. Just little sections of the drop. Don't think I'd have to go over that, but let's see. The next thing is this little music box. Another thing I kind of use frequently. It's weird, it's creepy. I like it. I believe this is just a little contact bank. Nothing crazy. And let's see the leads. Load this up. That one's not as loud as I thought. Oh, it gets louder in the second half, that's right. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for the leads there and the chords. Little build up, just adding reverb in. And then bringing that bass in. I'm not a huge fan of like snare buildups. Sometimes they can be a little bit too cheesy, so that's why I like using the little reverbed out build there. So yeah, the lead in the second half, I believe, comes in. Yeah, so that's where this is. And then pitching it up adds tension, obviously. Then yeah, let's see. The next thing, we'll go over the vocal thing later. This atmosphere group, again, pretty basic. One's just a little pad. I ran this one through I think I did this on stream. I do a lot of like stream with Eurorack stuff where I'm just doing those recording jams. This one sounds like it is the reel-to-reel below, and then I ran it through. If I hop back over here, ran it through this mutable instruments clouds I got, which is fantastic for making pads and all that kind of stuff. Back into the DAW here. This first sound is just a tape machine. It's just the noise of a reel-to-reel tape machine, which I found pretty cool. Nice little layer there. You can kind of hear it spinning away. On these ones, I tend to add a auto pan again, just to A, add movement to the track, and B, it gets out of the way of the other things you're using. Something I was taught when I first started was to have it be uneven. If it's even, it gets boring and repetitive. If it's uneven, you're like, okay, this is a bit more interesting. So that's why this one's set at a 1.5 bar rate on that. So yeah, the two of those, just atmosphere there. So add those in. Can't quite hear them, but they're there and they fill the track out. So if I take them out, pretty bland. Add them back in. Next thing, pretty basic little effects. They're all just like synth white noise recorded or something like that, or crashes. Nothing too crazy. But then adding those in will smoothen out your transition and your build-up, or add impacts when you need it to. See, bring that sweep up. If you use a tiny little sweep here before the start of your statement that we talked about earlier, it adds more impact to it. So literally just a little tiny sweep. See how it just sucks you into that? Nothing crazy, but it helps. So yeah, that's how that intro into the build and the drop works. Back to the vocal here. It wasn't anything crazy. I found some like vocal sample that I liked, chopped it up and made a pattern that worked with this song. This song was done before this vocal chop was added in, so I kind of made it work that way, which was pretty nice that it worked out. Let's see. Again, I was on a Mordfustang listening spree when I made this track, so you can kind of tell. Then repeats just that last little section going into build-up. Have the one chop over the drop there. So then yeah, it's, you guys know how that drop goes there. Second verse, kind of have everything starting under a filter and kind of building up. I believe it's the same length as the first verse, and then we add in this lead here as well. So it's not the exact same. I like to keep it a little different to keep things interesting. I also had that lead vocal more reverberated, delayed. second drop that goes into this, but I changed up that second 4 bars of the drop. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the production. I will flip on over to Pro Tools here and we'll show you some of the mixing stuff. Alright, so this is the 1348 mix project over in Pro Tools. Same layout as you saw in Ableton, just a different screen. Main reason I use Pro Tools for mixing is because it is the industry standard when it comes to that. I interned at a studio and they kind of ingrain that in your head, like everyone's using this, which I understand completely why they want us to do that. And once you understand this software, it's very, very, very helpful during the mixing stage. When you're writing though, not a huge fan. It's not as efficient as Ableton in that aspect, or Bitwig. So yeah, a couple of things that stand out to me in Pro Tools is the ability to have something dead mono. In Ableton, it's kind of a fake mono. So as you can see right here, the kick drum, I brought the width down. This is the panning, so 100% right and left would just give you your stereo signal. If you bring it down to 0/0, it's straight mono. Let's see, on the kick drum and the sub, I did that. So down here, so they are dead mono, so they're smack in the center of the mix, which is what you want with kick and sub. Unless you have some like top end of your kick that you want to have a little bit wider, but you don't want to have all of it be wide because then it just will not sound good at all. Then it won't translate to club systems very well. Definitely doing mono checks during your mix is extremely helpful. Next thing I like about Pro Tools is the CPU usage. Ableton's really bad at that. They designed that software for live performing, so it focuses mainly on single core usage, which you can max out pretty quickly. With Pro Tools, it's designed for studio setting, so CPU usage is vastly different. In Ableton, I'll be getting crackling and everything from my CPU being worked so hard, but then come into Pro Tools with the exact same stuff, and it's not even close to distorting or breaking up. So when you're mixing, you're using a lot of CPU heavy plugins, and Pro Tools will help you out with that. So yeah, the next thing I also like is the routing within Pro Tools. I didn't do too much of it in this one because my returns are already done here. But basically like the sends and everything. For example, here's the kick. I have the kick being sent to this send here. So then I can trigger each, let's see, like this is probably sent, or sorry, or is the sidechain? There we go. So it's sent right here. Basically, it's a lot easier than Ableton, and when you do that with Ableton, it ties the cores of your computer together even more, making you overload your computer a lot quicker. So yeah, Pro Tools is great for that. Let's see. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty simple there. When you're working in a studio setting too, you can have things like hardware inserts, which I don't have any outboard gear, unfortunately. But yeah, basically the way this works is it inserts right here, the same as a plugin would, but then it compensates for that delay as well. So it corrects your time, whereas if you were to just patch out of your interface into the hardware, patch back in, it does not compensate for that automatically. So you'll get some offset there between where your audio is, and it won't line up right. So yeah, kind of let's break down this track now. You can kind of hear how different it sounds from the production project. So yeah, it sounds a little different here. A few of these were committed already. Looks like a lot of them actually. Probably just to get myself back into audio. But yeah, I like Neutron's little sculptor here. It definitely changes the way your drums pop. So that's without. A lot different. You get more punch with your kick. Next one, this SSL G compressor. The UA one is fantastic. Pretty spot on with the actual SSL compressor on the console. Did a little bit of testing there with that one, and yeah, it's closer than the Waves one. The Waves one is not very good, at least in my opinion. Some people might like it. Next one I use is this Neve UA plugin. UA is probably my go-to brand for plugins. Again, they do the most accurate analog replicas in plugin format. So yeah, this is a Neve channel strip here. So basically just doing EQ on this. So this is the EQ section right here. As you can see, I'm kind of like boosting probably about 10K, just a tiny little bit here. And it's on shelf mode, pulling a little bit of that harshness out right here. Pulling, let's see, no, this one, yeah, this one's pulling out at like 200. 200 to 500 can get messy real quick. So if you can sculpt out little sections of that to add clarity to your mix, it's extremely beneficial. Didn't do anything to the low end because I was having low end issues with this track. So yeah, but without this, it sounds. You can kind of hear down there in that this little region right here, that low mid section. You can hear it clear up a bit just with this and this. Yeah, you hear that kick clear up there. This one, let's see. Yeah, I went back and changed this. This EQ I added in after the fact. As you can see, I'm on version 10 of this mix. I was trying to clear it up a bit. It was a bit muddy and low end heavy, and I didn't want to adjust these. And I just like leaving those as is, so I'll just add another plugin at the end to kind of sculpt out, because obviously these ones are. This is not as accurate as something like this would be. I use this in mixing, and then a lot of the Fab Filter stuff. So yeah, that one. Let's see if I bypass that. You see it cleans up that muddy area again. Again, same thing here. I'm struggling with it. And this is on all of the drums, by the way. This is just the drum bus that I'm showing you. And then adding this here kind of gives you more of a sparkle. Brought that hi-hat out a little bit. And then compressing because my kick was too loud again. Yeah, so these next two things here are just sidechain being sent out. And more of the EQ here on this. This was all of my drums together. So then you can see at least what I did on these plugs. You hear how muffled it is. This is coming from the last project too. So you can see that high end immediately opened up with this, and then pulled out that little bit right there. This next one, Pro Q3, controlling that, and this. There's still a frequency I don't like in this, but I gave up on it. Sometimes you just gotta move on. This Meg EQ, it's another UA one. As you can see, I added a ton to the airband on this because they weren't bright enough for me without it. Not bright enough. Then add it back in. Really brings that top end back in, or airband. It's up at 40 kilohertz, which is out of the ability for humans to hear, but it adds air, I guess. It adds that airband, and the air will like kind of open up your track without affecting the tonality of the drums. Let's see. Bass bus. I'll get out of here. Again, just using this SSLG compressor again. It's really good at one, using the sidechain to let that like low end be untouched when you're compressing. So it's great at balancing it out. It's really good on your overall mix bus, your drums, and then your bass stuff. So yeah, as you can see, you're not supposed to do a whole lot of this on here. General idea is just to kind of stick around 4 or below. You don't want to go too much. That's just going to end up smashing everything, and you'll lose a lot of dynamics. Here, let's see, getting rid of more clutter that I had. This frequency band is a nightmare for me. Same with this one, so I actually have this setting here that kind of pulls the two of them, so I can just load this and turn these on and see if one of them fixes it. So yeah, this, you can hear how disgusting that sounds, and that's why I have this made. The other one is this harsh. Right around there, that 2 to 3K mark gets kind of nasty. So yeah, without that, see how much it opened it up when I put that in? Yeah, so there's that one. This main bus here is for all of these, and I believe what I'm doing here is just EQing all of the mains. So basically that statement response that I had going in the production project, which is just these. So yeah, as you can see, just pulling out this, just disgusting. I can't stand that frequency range. That harshness again, and then a little bit here. I had to actually do a little bit more research on this stuff when I was mixing this track, because I was struggling with this frequency band. And if you kind of sweep around in here, specifically towards, I believe it was 700 down to 200, and just do like a little 1 dB reduction, it can really open up some space for you in your mix. So that's why this guy's here. Again, just nothing too crazy again, but it all adds up. It's good to carve a lot of space out for each sound. I know a lot of people will do that as they're designing the sounds, but I like to use as many sounds as I can. At least try, I guess, and then make them cohesive with each other. Sometimes it ends up being a bit muddy, especially when you're using all the hardware stuff. But it's whatever, it's art. So yeah, again, on this chug bus, which is now the answer part of my production. So let's see. As you can see, I was definitely struggling there with the harshness on this one. the G compressor again on just the entire bus. I use this 1073 just for the EQ mostly. As you can see, I just pulled a little bit out and boosted a little bit on the low end, and then rolled off down below 160 to make room for the kick sub stuff. Let's see. I think this was more EQ, multi-band. Yeah, this multi-band was pretty key in getting this sound to pop here. You can hear that harshness. So I'm bringing this down. This is what I didn't like. And then you'll hear this area too, which is really kind of the meat of that sound. And then I got this one here too. This sound was pretty wide when I sent it over here. So without it, kind of hear that there. So there you go. And then I pulled down the mid too, so it makes room for the rest of the stuff that's going on. So that's with, and then without. And that's just with mid side. So then add it back in. Alright, and then good old newfangled audio here. This is just their EQ. It's basically a graphic EQ. Pretty standard kind of stuff. You can kind of, let's see if I can do this without ruining that one. So you can just go in here and just draw. Computer's lagging a bit there. But yeah, you can draw in what you want on that. And then that will help out. So when I was struggling with certain frequency bands, as you can see, I took those out and then left that top end alone. So without that, yep, and then yep, it was being side chained here, probably just to get it out of the way of some of these things, like the kick again. Sometimes I like to double up on side chain, which is kind of bad, but I will do it in the production project, and then when you do things like saturation and compression, everything, it brings back up where you're side chaining. So with this, it's just kind of making sure that even after your saturation, all that stuff, it's still out of the way. Didn't do a whole lot other than EQing on these fills here. I love the way they came out of this modular, so yeah, all the sounds you heard in the production project, this is just EQ'd. Low end cutout, harshness, all that kind of stuff. Down to the leads, not much going on here, more EQ. Again, the G compressor. This one was giving me some issues here when I was balancing in this vocal. So I took this out and it seemed to work. Opened up the top end a bit. And then brought that into you. Fab Filter Saturn is great for the saturation. Let's see. See what I mean? Just adds that like nice filling aspect to it. Saturation. Let's see. This plugin is fantastic for tape saturation. So what it does is you're basically cranking the input, and you're getting the tape sound from this plugin, and you turn the output down to kind of match the input gain. So if you go up 10, you bring the output down, left it a little bit up to give me some gain here. But basically when you use this plugin, you'll get greater perceived loudness. So basically that means your drums are gonna, let's say you use it on your drums, you crank your input gain and match the output gain, it's going to be louder even though technically it's the same thing. So if you use a plugin like, there's one, I want to say it's Waves, WLM meter, there we go. So you can use this, and you can see like the loudness meter here. Where's that one at? You hear the difference with and without? So, see how that meter didn't jump? It's a little bit louder now because the filter's opening, but back at the beginning, it doesn't change. It's still opening with that filter, but it sounds louder, if that makes sense. Yeah, perceived loudness is a great thing. It helps you clear up space in your mix without just cranking your volume up. Yeah, so those two plugins are great for that. Let's see what else is going on. Just more EQ, saturation, multiband, more EQ. These things didn't really need much because they're just out of the way. Nothing crazy going on there. The vocal got EQ'd, obviously. The intro quote was EQ'd, and that was added last minute too, so there's more there. But yeah, other than that, LFO tool, taking the sub out of the way again, and these things are just EQ'd, they're committed audio files there. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much how I work around my mix project. Lots of EQ, tape saturation, volume balancing, making things mono when necessary, multi-band compression, and then as many analog plugins as possible. Yeah, other than that, that's pretty much all I have to say about 1348. Hope you guys enjoyed it.